The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. Now,
good morning, and welcome to the first video under my new channel name, the Clarion Call. I'm not going to be doing a music reaction today, but I am going to react to a very famous speech that was given 60 years ago in October of 1964 by Ronald Reagan. He did it in support of the Republican nominee for president of that year, Barry Goldwater, who went down to a crashing defeat by Lyndon Johnson. But it was a speech that really made Ronald Reagan's political career, put him on the map. It's a speech that really still continues to have a great deal of truth in our modern day. Mr. Reagan had recently left the Democratic Party when he gave this speech. He had been practicing this speech and giving it to conventions and service club meetings around the country for about 2 years before he had it polished to what you're going to see right here. You know, I thought this was relevant because I've heard a lot of talk, and I've used the term myself, that America has come into a new era now, what people are calling morning in America. Well, for those who are younger, you may not recall that the last time we talked about morning in America was Ronald Reagan's re-election campaign in 1984, 40 years ago. I thought it might be interesting to go back and see how Ronald got started, and he is known as the Great Communicator, and I think you will see why that is.
The following pre-recorded political program is sponsored by TV for Goldwater Miller on behalf of Barry Goldwater, Republican candidate for President of the United States. Ladies and gentlemen, we take pride in presenting a thoughtful address by Ronald Reagan. Mr. Reagan.
thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you and good evening. The sponsor has been identified, but unlike most television programs, the performer hasn't been provided with a script. As a matter of fact, I have been permitted to choose my own words and discuss my own ideas regarding the choice that we face in the next few weeks. I have spent most of my life as a Democrat. I recently have seen fit to follow another course. I believe that the issues confronting us cross party lines. Now, one side in this campaign has been telling us that the issues of this election are the maintenance of peace and prosperity. The line has been used, we've never had it so good. But I have an uncomfortable feeling that this prosperity isn't something on which we can base our hopes for the future. No nation in history has ever survived a tax burden that reached a third of its national income. Today, 37 cents out of every dollar earned in this country is the tax collector's share.
I believe we have to update that number. I'm not sure. I think it's now over 50% when you add in all the various taxes that people have to pay, not just the income tax, but the sales taxes, the state and local taxes, the property taxes, the gasoline taxes, on and on. There's no end to the ways that the government gets their hand in your pocket. The title of the speech is A Time for Choosing, and so ostensibly, he's talking about should choose Barry Goldwater for president, but he's also talking about a choice to be made for the future of our country in much broader terms.
Continues to spend $17 million a day more than the government takes in. We haven't balanced our budget 28 out of the last 34 years. We've raised our debt limit 3 times in the last 12 months. And now our national debt is 1.5 times bigger than all the combined debts of all the nations of the world. We have $15 billion in gold in our treasury. We don't own an ounce. Foreign dollar claims are $27.3 billion. And we've just had announced that the dollar of 1939 will now purchase 45 cents in its total value.
Now, we could go through and update all of those numbers, but obviously, I don't know when the last time there was a balanced budget. It's at least 30 years, I think, if then. Our national debt just went over $35 trillion. What can't go on will not go on. And Reagan saw it coming 60 years ago.
As for the peace that we would preserve, I wonder who among us would like to approach the wife or mother whose husband or son has died in South Vietnam and ask them if they think this is a peace. We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening. Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. Not too long ago, two friends of mine were talking to a Cuban refugee, a businessman who had escaped from Castro. And in the midst of his story, one of my friends turned to the other and said, "We don't know how lucky we are." And the Cuban stopped and said, "How lucky you are. I had some place to escape to." And in that sentence, he told us the entire story. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
You can see the rhetorical brilliance of the man. You know, he tells this little story about the Cuban refugee, and then he ties it in with this great concept that America is the last great hope of mankind. And for those who don't recognize, that line is actually cribbed from Abraham Lincoln's inaugural address over 100 years before. I don't know if he had speechwriters or he wrote this stuff himself, but he has a wonderful way of explaining things in very, very simple terms. I'm not going to be able to react to the entire speech. It's a 29-minute speech, and I can only cover some of the highlights here. There will be some parts of the speech cut out in the editing process.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves. You and I are told increasingly we have to choose between a left or right. Well, I'd like to suggest there is no such thing as a left or right. There's only an up or down. Man's old age dream, the ultimate in individual freedom consistent with law and order, or down to the ant-heap of totalitarianism.
I'm just so impressed by the word choices here, the writing of this speech, you know, from the swamp to the stars, the anthill of totalitarianism.
The ultimate in individual freedom consistent with law and order, or down to the ant-heap of totalitarianism. And regardless of their sincerity, their humanitarian motives, those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course.
Again, echoing, I believe, Benjamin Franklin, those who would trade their freedom for a little bit of liberty deserve neither.
In this boat harvesting time, they use terms like the Great Society, or as we were told a few days ago by the President, we must accept a greater government activity in the affairs of the people. But they've been a little more explicit in the past, and among themselves, and all of the things I now will quote have appeared in print. These are not Republican accusations. Senator Fulbright has said at Stanford University that the Constitution is outmoded. He referred to the President as our moral teacher and our leader. And he says he is hobbled in his task by the restrictions of power imposed on him by this antiquated document. He must be freed so that he can do for us what he knows is best. And Senator Clark of Pennsylvania, another articulate spokesman, defines liberalism as meeting the material needs of the masses through the full power of centralized government. Well, I, for one, resent it when a representative of the people refers to you and me, the free men and women of this country, as the masses. This is a term we haven't applied to ourselves in America. But beyond that, the full power of centralized government, this was the very thing the Founding Fathers sought to minimize. They knew that governments don't control things. A government can't control the economy without controlling people. And they know when a government sets out to do that, it must use force and coercion to achieve its purpose.
Boy, he's really nailing it here. And don't all those arguments ring so true? Even today, we're being told by our friends on the left that the Constitution is an antiquated document that was made by a bunch of white men, some of whom were slaveholders, and it doesn't really fit in our modern world. They'd like to get rid of all the things that make our country great. But as Ronald so aptly put it, we are not the masses. We are individual citizens, and the government derives its power from us, not the other way around.
They also knew, those founding fathers, that outside of its legitimate functions, government does nothing as well or as economically as the private sector of the economy. For 3 decades, we've sought to solve the problems of unemployment through government planning, and the more the plans fail, the more the planners plan. We have so many people who can't see a fat man standing beside a thin one without coming to the conclusion the fat man got that way by taking advantage of the thin one. So they're going to solve all the problems of human misery through government and government planning. Well, now, if government planning and welfare had the answer, and they've had almost 30 years of it, shouldn't we expect government to read the score to us once in a while? Shouldn't they be telling us about the decline each year in the number of people needing help, the reduction in the need for public housing? But the reverse is true. Each year the need grows greater, the program grows greater.
Very good point. This speech was given shortly before Johnson was reelected and passed the Great Society, which greatly expanded all the welfare programs that he's talking about here. But have we seen any reduction in the poverty level and the number of people on public assistance? No. The opposite has been true. These programs, once started, grow and grow and grow and add more and more people to the rolls by design. You're easier to handle when you're dependent upon the government for your daily bread. Ronald Reagan represents a different idea, the idea of self-reliance, something that used to be very, very important in this country.
The reverse is true. Each year the need grows greater, the program grows greater. We were told 4 years ago that 17 million people went to bed hungry each night. Well, that was probably true. They were all on a diet. But now we're told that 9.3 million families in this country are poverty-stricken on the basis of earning less than $3,000 a year. Welfare spending 10 times greater than it was in the dark depths of the Depression. We're spending $45 billion on welfare. Now do a little arithmetic and you'll find that if we divided the $45 billion up equally among those 9 million poor families, we'd be able to give each family $4,600 a year. And this, added to their present income, should eliminate poverty.
Stop, Ronnie, you're making too much sense. What about all the jobs for the bureaucrats? What would happen to them if we eliminated the middleman? Well, we might be about to find out, because I think the new Trump administration and the new Department of Government Efficiency is going to do just that, or at least try to eliminate as many government jobs as they can. Their goal is to cut $2 trillion out of our $5 trillion federal budget. Let's hope they can get at least half of that done.
Direct aid to the poor, however, is only running about $600 per family. It would seem that someplace there must be some overhead. So now we declare war on poverty. Now, do they honestly expect us to believe that if we add $1 billion to the $45 billion we're spending, one more program to the 30-odd we have, and remember, this new program doesn't replace any, it just duplicates existing programs, do they believe that poverty is suddenly going to disappear by magic? Well, in all fairness, I should explain there is one part of the new program that isn't duplicated. This is the youth feature. We're now going to solve the dropout problem, juvenile delinquency, by reinstituting something like the old CCC camps. And we're going to put our young people in these camps. But again, we do some arithmetic and we find that we're going to spend each year, just on room and board for each young person we help, $4,700 a year. We can send them to Harvard for $2,700.
You know, there's a smoldering anger in Ronnie's voice there. He's genuinely pissed off about some of this crazy, out-of-control spending. I think that was some of his great appeal, is that he spoke to the great middle class, the unwashed, those who, have those basic American values and couldn't understand why all these crazy programs were being implemented. And of course, Donald Trump spoke to that same core audience, that great, lower and middle class, hardworking country and urban audience. And so he put a coalition perhaps even better than the Reagan coalition. Hopefully the mandate that he has received will translate into a lot of his policies being implemented.
Of course, don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting Harvard is the answer to juvenile delinquency. But seriously, what are we doing to those we seek to help? Not too long ago, a judge called me here in Los Angeles. He told me that a young woman who'd come before him for a divorce. She had 6 children, was pregnant with her 7th. Under his questioning, she revealed her husband was a laborer earning $250 a month. She wanted the divorce to get an $80 raise. She's eligible for $330 a month in the Aid to Dependent Children program. She got the idea from 2 women in her neighborhood who'd already done that very thing. Yet any time you and I question the schemes of the do-gooders, we're denounced as being against their humanitarian goals. They say we're always against things, we're never for anything. Well, the trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
That's a very famous line from Ronald Reagan. I'm sure many of you have heard that one before. But notice how he weaves these little stories into the speech. An anonymous person called him up and told him the story, supposedly. Who knows whether it's true or not, but it represents a fact of life that it was only just beginning back then, but we know how many single mothers there are because our welfare system subsidizes single mothers, pays them if they're single. If they're living with their husbands and the fathers of their children, you know, you're on your own, but get rid of that husband and boy, we got some money for you. It's a terribly perverse system of incentives. It's been going on now for over 60 years and we can look around us and see the results and they aren't good. I think it's worth hearing that line again.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so. Now,
I think we can stop there. We're only about halfway through the speech, but there's enough material there to make a nice little video. And of course, the link to the full speech will be in the description, and I hope you get a chance to watch it. It's good background for what's going to be happening here next year. I did wear my coat today in honor of the president, but also because it's freezing in here. I don't have much heat in my YouTube studio. The temperature in this room currently is 45 degrees. That's another reason that I'm going to cut this a little short right now because I can only do so much in this type of weather. But it's been pretty cold here compared to last year, December, when I was out playing tennis outside at this time. No tennis for a while now as everything is frozen over with temperatures below 10 degrees in the last few days. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this little reaction and look forward to continuing on with the Clarion Call.